When you begin to put God first, something extraordinary happens, not always in the way people expect, but always in the way the soul needs. At first, it may feel like surrender, like laying down the rights you thought belonged to you. The heart resists. It clings to its own desires, its own timing, its own way of seeing the world. But when God is placed above all else, the very order of life begins to change, as if a great lamp has been lit in a room that was once dim. Suddenly, what once seemed confusing or heavy takes on a different meaning. Putting God first is not about losing the things you love. It is about learning where they truly belong. When you love God above all, every other love falls into its proper place. Friendships are no longer about what you can get, but about how you can serve. Work is no longer just a means of survival or ambition, but a way of glorifying something greater. Even pain itself does not remain an enemy. It becomes a teacher, guiding the soul towards strength, compassion, and eternal hope. The truth is, when God is not first, everything else becomes restless. The heart tries to make gods out of people, success, money, comfort, or even its own pride. And yet, these are fragile things. They cannot carry the weight of worship. They disappoint us, and we, in turn, grow bitter, anxious, or empty. But when God is first, even the smallest details of life are transformed. A meal shared in gratitude becomes holy. A day's labor becomes worship. A moment of silence becomes filled with presence. What happens when you put God first is not merely that you become religious or moral. It is that your entire being is reordered. The soul is no longer tossed by every storm because it has found its anchor. Joy is no longer dependent on circumstances because it flows from a deeper well. And even in loss, even in suffering, there is the quiet assurance that nothing is wasted, that all things are being woven into a tapestry beyond your sight. And perhaps the most surprising thing is this: when you give God the first place, you find that you do not lose yourself, but finally discover yourself. For the one who made you knows your design, and when your life is aligned with Him, you begin to live as you were always meant to. The heart becomes freer, not bound. The mind becomes clearer, not clouded. The spirit becomes alive, not burdened. So what happens when you put God first? You do not merely rearrange your priorities. You are remade. You do not simply shift your schedule. You shift your foundation, and you find, to your astonishment, that in placing Him above all else, you have gained more than you ever imagined. For in giving Him the first place, everything else falls into place. When you put God first, every other love finds its rightful place, and life that once felt restless becomes whole. When you put God first, every other love finds its rightful place, and life that once felt restless becomes whole. It begins as a quiet reordering, a shift that may seem small at first, but grows into something profound. The heart that once clung desperately to people or possessions learns to hold them with open hands, because it knows that they are gifts and not gods. The restless pursuit of being noticed, of being praised, of being loved above all else, begins to lose its power because the soul has found the one love that does not fail. When God becomes first, there is no longer the crushing weight of demanding from others what they cannot possibly give. A friend can simply be a friend, not a savior. A spouse can be a companion, not a source of ultimate identity. A child can be cherished for who they are, not for what they fulfill. Every love that was once distorted by fear, control, or selfishness is purified when it is placed in its proper order beneath the love of God. The restless heart knows what it is to wander from one thing to another, searching for satisfaction and finding only fleeting joy. One season it clings to success, the next it chases wealth, the next it craves recognition. Yet each of these things, when pursued as ultimate, leaves behind a hollow ache. But when God is placed first, even the smallest of these things can carry meaning without becoming idols. Success becomes an opportunity to serve. Wealth becomes a tool for blessing. Recognition becomes a chance to point beyond oneself. The heart is freed from chasing shadows because it has found the substance. There is a harmony that enters life when God is at the center. Priorities align not through force but through peace. Time feels different because it is no longer a race to achieve but a gift to steward. Work takes on dignity not because it makes us important, but because it becomes an offering to the one who gave us skill. Rest is no longer laziness or guilt, but a reflection of trust that the world does not revolve around us. Even suffering, though still painful, is no longer meaningless. The person who places God first can look at loss and still find hope, because they know that nothing is wasted in His hands. It is a strange paradox that when you love God first, you actually love others more, not less. A love grounded in Him is not a love of possession or fear, but of freedom and strength. To love someone without needing them to complete you is to love them in the truest way. To forgive not out of weakness, but because you have been forgiven, is to love them with a strength that goes beyond human will. To sacrifice not because you are coerced, but because you see every gift as already belonging to God, is to love with joy. And so the restless heart, once driven by anxieties and endless desire, begins to find wholeness. It does not mean that life is free of hardship, but it does mean that life is no longer directionless. The soul that places God first stands like a tree planted by streams of water, nourished from a source that does not dry up. Storms may come, winds may blow, but the roots hold fast. This steadiness spreads into every corner of life. Relationships are steadier because they are not built on shifting need. Work is steadier because it is not driven by pride alone. Dreams are steadier because they are not crushed when they do not unfold as planned. Wholeness comes not because the person now has everything they want, but because they have finally placed their deepest desire where it belongs. To put God first is to step into reality as it truly is, not as we imagine it should be. It is to live in alignment with truth, rather than in the illusion that we can control everything. It is to taste a freedom that no amount of possessions or applause can ever give. For when He is first, the soul no longer needs to scramble for meaning. It lives within meaning itself. God first does not mean you lose what matters. It means you finally discover the true meaning of all things. God first does not mean you lose what matters. It means you finally discover the true meaning of all things. Many fear that putting God above everything will strip life of joy, as if surrendering to Him means abandoning the beauty of love, ambition, or the delight of creation. Yet the opposite is true. It is only when God is placed first that all these things come alive in their fullest and richest form. Without Him at the center, the good things of life turn fragile and temporary, quickly fading like mist in the morning sun. But with Him first, even the smallest blessings begin to shine with a deeper purpose, and the larger pursuits of life find their rightful direction. When God is not first, we tend to cling too tightly to the things around us, placing on them a weight they cannot bear. We demand from people a kind of perfect loyalty that no human heart can deliver. We expect from success an unshakable satisfaction that it cannot provide. We treat comfort as if it can shield us from the brokenness of the world, but comfort is fleeting and fragile. The problem is not in the things themselves, but in the way we raise them to the throne of our hearts. When God is not first, we look to what is temporary for eternal security, and sooner or later it collapses. But when God is first, people can be loved without being idolized, achievements can be enjoyed without being worshipped, and possessions can be used without being clung to. The true meaning of life is not discovered in chasing one temporary high after another, but in recognizing that every gift points back to the giver. When you put God first, the beauty of nature is no longer just scenery. It becomes a reminder of His artistry. The laughter of a child is no longer just a fleeting sound. It is a glimpse of innocence and joy that reflects His goodness. Even food on the table becomes more than survival. It becomes an act of provision to be received with gratitude. The ordinary is infused with the extraordinary when seen through the lens of God being first. There is also a new clarity that emerges when God takes His rightful place. Choices that once seemed clouded by confusion begin to align under a greater purpose. The ambitions that once consumed the mind with constant comparison lose their grip because their value is weighed against eternity rather than against the fleeting applause of men. The temptation to measure self-worth by wealth, appearance, or status is broken because the soul has found its worth in being known and loved by the Creator. This clarity does not remove all difficulty from decision-making, but it does provide an unshakable compass that points true north no matter the storm. The meaning of love itself is transformed when God is first. Love becomes more than sentiment, more than desire, more than the fragile exchange of affection that can so easily falter. It becomes a reflection of something eternal. To love another person when God is first is to see them not merely as they appear now, but as a soul with infinite worth, created in His image. To forgive becomes possible even when it feels undeserved, because you yourself have been forgiven. To serve becomes a joy even when unnoticed, because you know that in serving another you serve Him. This is love with depth, love with resilience, love that outlasts disappointment and hardship, because it is not rooted in self, but in God. Putting God first does not erase ambition, but it redefines it. Ambition becomes not about climbing ladders for personal glory, but about using your gifts faithfully in whatever measure you are given. The artist paints not just for recognition, but as an act of worship. The leader leads not only to wield power, but to protect and serve. The laborer works not merely for wages, but for dignity and provision. Every role, every task, every ambition takes on significance when seen as part of something larger than the self. The emptiness of striving only for self-gain is replaced by the fullness of striving for God's glory. And in that striving, joy is discovered even in the hardest labor. And then there is suffering. Without God first, suffering feels like a thief that steals meaning, a darkness that swallows all hope. But when God is first, even suffering can be transformed. It does not become pleasant, nor does it lose its sting, but it is no longer pointless. It refines the soul, shaping compassion and patience that cannot be learned any other way. It loosens the grip on temporary things and strengthens the longing for what is eternal. When God is first, suffering becomes not just something to endure, but something that can lead to a deeper communion with Him. To put God first is not to abandon the world, but to finally see the world as it truly is. The sun is brighter because you know the one who spoke it into being. Music is richer because it echoes something eternal. Human connection is more precious because you know it is a reflection of His love. You do not lose what matters. Instead, you discover that what matters has been pointing to Him all along. The gifts of life, when separated from God, lose their flavor quickly, but when tied to Him, they become glimpses of glory. In giving Him the highest place, you gain an anchor for every storm and a joy no circumstance can take away. In giving him the highest place, you gain an anchor for every storm and a joy no circumstance can take away. Life without an anchor is easily tossed about by the winds of change, the currents of fear, and the weight of uncertainty. One moment you feel secure, and the next moment everything seems to collapse. The approval of others can vanish overnight. Money can be lost in an instant. Relationships can shift without warning, and health can weaken when you least expect it. Without something greater to hold you steady, the heart drifts from one fragile source of security to another, never finding lasting peace. But when God is given the highest place, when he becomes the center around which everything else revolves, there is a stability that no storm can undo. You are no longer defined by what happens to you, but by the one who holds you. The storms of life are not always visible on the outside. Sometimes they rage quietly within the soul. Anxieties creep in, doubts whisper, and fears multiply. People can look strong to the world while carrying private battles of despair, loneliness, or guilt. Without an anchor, those inner storms can pull a person under, leaving them hopeless and weary. Yet when God is first, his presence becomes the anchor that steadies the mind and heart. The waves may still rise, but they no longer dictate your direction. The winds may howl, but they cannot uproot what is firmly secured. It is not the absence of storms that marks the difference, but the presence of an anchor that holds fast no matter how fierce the sea. That anchor is not made of human strength or fleeting promises. It is grounded in the unchanging nature of God himself. People change, circumstances shift, emotions waver, but he remains constant. His faithfulness does not depend on the measure of your faith. His love does not crumble under the weight of your failures. His purpose is not broken by the resistance of the world. When he is given the highest place, the soul rests in something unshakable, something eternal, and this rest becomes a source of strength that no external trial can take away. With this anchor comes a joy unlike any other. It is not the shallow joy that comes from fleeting pleasures or temporary success. Those forms of joy are fragile. They evaporate the moment hardship comes. But the joy rooted in God's presence is not tied to circumstances. It runs deeper than the surface of life, flowing from the assurance that you are known, loved, and held by the Creator of all things. It is the kind of joy that can coexist with tears, that can stand firm in loss, that can quietly shine even in the darkest valleys. This joy is not loud or boastful, but steady and enduring, a light that no shadow can extinguish. When God is first, even the storms themselves begin to reveal meaning. They no longer seem like random chaos, but like waves that, though painful, are shaping the soul, carving it into something stronger and more compassionate. Each difficulty, though unwelcome, becomes a reminder that the anchor is holding, and with every storm endured, trust deepens, faith strengthens, and joy becomes less dependent on the shifting tides of life. The very trials that once threatened to destroy you become the evidence of how unshakable your foundation truly is. This joy is also liberating. It frees you from the chains of comparison, because your worth is not found in outdoing others, but in being secure in Him. It frees you from the grip of fear, because your future is anchored in His hands. It frees you from bitterness, because you can release what you cannot control, knowing that He sees, He knows, and He works all things for good. It frees you from despair, because no loss can erase the eternal hope you carry. This freedom allows you to live with open hands and open heart, not clinging desperately to fragile securities, but resting in the one who cannot be shaken. An anchored life looks different to the world. Where others are consumed with worry over tomorrow, you carry peace. Where others collapse under pressure, you endure. Where others chase after the next source of happiness, You walk with a steady joy that does not depend on external gain. This difference is not because you are stronger, wiser, or better, but because you have chosen to give God the highest place, and in doing so, you are upheld by His strength. People may not always understand it, but they see it. They see that storms do not destroy you, that losses do not consume you, that setbacks do not define you. And in seeing it, they glimpse something greater than you. They glimpse the one who holds you. The storms of life will come, and the joys of life will fade if they are tied only to the temporary. But when God is placed first, you discover that joy is not fragile but resilient, not momentary but eternal. It becomes a joy that nothing can steal, not even sorrow, because it is rooted in the one who cannot be moved. To live anchored in Him is to live with unshakable confidence, knowing that no matter how fierce the winds, you will not be swept away, and no matter how dark the night, your joy will not be extinguished.